But first off, I wouldn't hire anyone in my organization as a frontline leader if they didn't pass the interview on how they do enablement, right? So like a lot of the behavioral-based interview questions we'll ask our sales leadership is, what's the level of importance for enablement? How do you do enablement? What do you think your core responsibility is in enablement? And those questions, right, are really important to ask, because you'll get some that say, hey, enablement, they're supposed to train up my guys and get them battle ready. Don't send them to me till battle ready. They won't make it through the first interview.
Great to see everybody today. My name is John Carlson. I'm VP of Marketing here at Saleshand. Excited to have a good crowd on today, and so excited to be joined by Carrie Bosworth and Dave Frechette. Guys, thanks so much for joining. It's such a pleasure to have folks of your caliber on the line and to be working with you and to have you bring your knowledge to the table. So often in the world of sales enablement, we get very in the weeds. We focus on enablement tactics, and we focus on so much on the seller, and we often neglect to talk about sales leadership, right? And the sales leader's perspective and why enablement is so critical to overall sales success. And if you're a revenue leader, why you need enablement in order to be successful. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Dave and Carrie are going to dive deep, and they have some great personal stories to share. I'm going to really give the floor to them and just guide the conversation along. But what a great opportunity to have to learn from you guys. So we're going to get to you as quickly as possible. But just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded. So if you have colleagues who couldn't make it, or if you want to watch it on demand or share it with folks on your team, feel free to do so. That recording will be shared likely tomorrow. You'll get an email, so keep your eyes open for that. Also, we definitely really encourage you guys to use the Q&A and chat function. Let's have a conversation. If you have questions as the dialogue is going on, ask your question right in the chat panel, and we'll try to answer it in real time. And if we don't get to it in real time, we'll save it for the end, and hopefully we'll get to everybody's questions and comments. But this is much more powerful if it's a dialogue with the entire group. So definitely encourage you guys to do that. But that's really it. So again, let's set the scene for a second. Enablement, I think, is at a bit of a crossroads, right? The market has evolved so much in the past few years, certainly since COVID, but even before then, right? Sales enablement used to be content management. It used to be owned by product marketing in a lot of cases. But now the world of content and learning and coaching, guided selling, all of these areas are coalescing, right? Into a single function. And as sales leaders, as enablement leaders, and as sellers, we need to sort of rethink our approach to enablement and figure out how to use it to optimize our teams. I think often when we think about increasing our sales performance, we just think about sort of selling through brute force, right? Let's just hire more reps, let's get more heads in there, let's sell more heads equals more revenue, right? But what could happen if we get more efficient with our teams, right? What if we get them to lift their games, right? Raise their games to a higher level, and every rep starts producing more and starts staying with the company for longer, right? Attrition can go down. Let's start thinking about optimizing sales teams in that way. So, I think there's so much to dig into today, but Dave, Carrie, I'm gonna hand it over to you now. So let's just start from a high level. Why don't you guys share your enablement story, sort of how you came to think about enablement over time and why enablement matters to you and to your team. And Carrie, let's start with you.
Okay, thanks for having me, by the way. I'm excited to be here. I think that if you are currently approaching enablement without the sales leader, it's a big miss. So I have a lot of thoughts that I'll share today on that. But I think, for me, enablement started, and the importance of it started at the beginning of my career where I was an individual contributor. I was lucky enough to be at companies that invested in enablement, at Quest Software and also at Salesforce. And I learned what great looks like through those experiences as an individual contributor. And I saw real time, like how it affected my progress, how quickly I was able to ramp. I stepped into software without any background in the software industry or really knowing what I was doing. So to be able to ramp as quickly as I was at Quest and then continue that on at Salesforce was critical for my career. And I think set the stage for what great should look like. When I moved into leadership, what I've quickly found out was that you can't just throw everything over the fence to enablement and hope that they're going to be able to deliver content and messaging and train your reps in a way that's going to be super impactful. I think one thing is the reps really respond well to their sales leaders. They know that sales leaders have done the job before. You know, Dave and I, we've closed 1 million deals. We've carried big quotas. Like, they're looking to us for leadership there. And from an enablement perspective, being cohesive and really delivering the coaching at scale together, I think is hugely important. I'm a big fan of, you know, I like to work with our enablement leaders to not only curate the content and what it is that we're doing and the type of schedule, but also to go through it myself first before we deliver it to the reps and to the leaders, so that I can make sure that I bridge any gaps that might happen from the enablement side. So I think, you know, for me, you know, we can talk a lot more about my story at Yext and some of the ways in which I partnered with Saleshood and really up-leveled my ability to deliver enablement and scale a team. But I think it started with what was enablement like for me as an individual contributor. And then even early on in my leadership career, you know, the impact it had on ramping all of my reps.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to come back to your personal story and get and dig
Sure.
into some specifics. But Dave,
Yeah.
Dave, why don't you go next? Give us your perspective.
Yeah, look, enablement's super important. So from a sales leader, there's a really couple of 3 legs in the stool that you have to think about. So enablement's first and foremost. Then it's the revenue operations, the data, and it supports the enablement strategy. And the last one is sales process execution. So when you think about and focus on enablement just for a second, 85% of a SaaS company's burn is human capital, right? So the biggest investment in a company are the people that work there, and sellers are probably the most expensive, right? So you're trying to hire the best and you're trying to ramp them, and enablement becomes just a key ingredient in helping attract A players and be able to keep people, right, and reduce attrition of your people. So without great enablement, your team's going to struggle. First off, you're going to have your narrative and your messaging all over the place. As a personal experience, really, I wasn't as fortunate as Carrie to get what I would call true sales enablement earlier in my career. It was always kind of product marketing led, and it was really way too focused on the features and functions of the technology, and it didn't really land as well as you know, having a narrative that it focuses on selling the business outcomes. When I was at Zuora, was really my first true experience. Zuora, for some of you know, the creators of the subscription economy and how companies actually have pivoted to business models. We were out evangelizing back in 2009, 2010 about the shift to the subscription economy and moving from one-time transactions to recurring revenue. And as you can imagine, back then, not every company was launching businesses or pivoting their business model to a subscription revenue model. But you know, selling billing's not sexy, so we had to come up with a narrative, and we brought in Saleshood to help us with that. So the story that I have is that we were able to, in 6 weeks, create a narrative and got everyone trained in the company on that narrative around the subscription economy and how companies are going to pivot to the subscription economy. If you've ever heard Teen Zoe, who's the founder, he was employee 11 at Salesforce. He was the chief strategy officer, chief marketing officer, really helped kind of evangelize multi-tenant SaaS that we all have the luxury today. And we were able to get all of our salespeople trained up in 6 weeks in time for our sales kickoff. And we gamified it, showcased it, and made a contest out of it, who had the best pitchbacks, leveraging the Saleshood for enablement. So that was like my first really big experience in doing enablement at scale. And you know, at the time I was asked to create the enablement program at Zuora, moving out of a sales leadership role where I was running about 2/3 of the revenue in North America into more of an operational go-to-market strategy and enablement role. And it was partnering with Saleshood and Eli Cohen that really changed the trajectory for Zuora. We went from 25 salespeople stuck at 30 million to an IPO at 185 million with, you know, 150 salespeople. So my story is like, you know, great because I think we were like customer number 2 or 3 back then when the platform just got launched.
That's amazing. And, you know, that success is entirely attributed to Saleshood, right? That's it. I mean, without Saleshood, you're dead in the water, right?
Well, it would have been really hard, right? It would have been super difficult because, you know, in an enablement forum, we know that 25% of information is lost within the first hour of learning it. 50% is lost within the first 30 days. So having this teach back methodology where you could teach it back and use video and, show that you really have command of your narrative or your sales training has a 92% retention of information. So we couldn't have really scaled it without a sales hood and got everybody on task in 6 weeks.
Well, I think that's what's so tough for so many leaders and enablement leaders is just getting people to retain information. And so much is invested in these big training sessions where you do data dumps and you expect people to learn and to get certified incredibly fast. And then you don't do anything to reinforce it, right? There's no mechanism to scale and reinforce it over time, and people lose that information and your investment is wasted. So I think that's a good point. And also, I mean, let's just talk about the fact that, you got people trained and up and running in 6 weeks. That's incredibly fast, right? And that allows you to do everything faster, right? Which is important.
It accelerated the business. Our deals got bigger. We closed deals faster. We got more access to the C-suite because we were able to line up with our narrative and the training that we rolled out. Just really line up against the C-suite, right? It became a strategic weapon for companies to pivot their business model to a subscription model where, other competitors were maybe still in a perpetual model at the time.
Yeah, amazing. Carrie, let's go back to you. I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about your experience at Yext and dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was brought on to Yext to build the commercial business unit essentially from scratch globally. And when I left, we were about 125 people. So when you think about like going from 0 to 125 over a 4-year span, how can you do that effectively? When I started, frankly, the first 6 months, we had Sales Hood. It was kind of a mess. We weren't really using it in a programmatic way. We had, the typical boot camp, drink from a fire hose type of approach where it's 4 weeks of like as much as you can retain, but then to Dave's point, you lose that after like the first 3 weeks. So how can you continue to put in scalable process so that people can continue to learn? And then how are we going to keep going as we continue to hire? Because the hiring never slows down. And as I mentioned to you when we were talking about all of this, like the biggest cost to any company is attrition. So, Eli's my phoned my friend. So I called Eli, and Jim Steele was a CRO at the time and their buddies. And I said to him, look, I need some help. I need to get in a room with you in San Francisco and collaborate for a day and put some things up on a whiteboard and figure out how to make a playbook for success to not only onboard all of the reps, but enable them and figure out a plan that's going to be a 30, 60, 90 day type of program. Because to me, and I'm doing this again at Checkr, the 30 days is just too short. You need to do the 30 days and you want to have that boot camp material and you want to go through your first pitches and all those types of things, but you really gain a lot of learning once you start to build upon those best practices. So, worked with Eli, we put a program into place, and then, fast forward 2 years later, then we shifted our go-to-market. So I called Eli again. I was like, so how are we going to shift this now to fit our new approach? You guys were also a customer of Yext, so he was very intimately involved with the product. So we had a lot of understanding on what we were trying to achieve. We started with outcomes first and then built backwards into a plan that included, all different ways in which people learn. There were live sessions, there was the video follow-up, there's the recording of yourself, there was contests, all those different things add to the learning and help with the retainment of the information. So that was my first, opportunity to create the plan and to build the plan. And now I'm going to replicate it at Checkr, but it was super impactful for me to have Sales Hood as a thought leadership partner in that. And also to be able to be the driver of how to deliver the training. Those videos were really impactful. And I think having someone record themselves where they're not necessarily on a stage with 300 other people and they can think thoughtfully about what they want to say and how they want to deliver the message is also important, because not everybody shines on a stage with 300 people. And I think that's something that you got to think about, how people can retain, learn, and build confidence. New hires, the goal is to build their confidence. You want to get them at bats. You want to get them comfortable in what they're doing in the shortest amount of time possible. 6 weeks is fantastic. I'm always trying to cut that time down. But if they're not confident, they're not feeling good about what they're doing, you risk attrition.
Absolutely. No, and you're right. Probably the greatest cost to a company is attrition, period. And attrition of salespeople is horrible, right? Because not only are you losing employees and spending money and time to replace them, but nobody's selling. That person's not selling for you, right? They're not bringing in revenue. So
it's also a recruiting tool. Every conversation I have with any rep or leader that I'm talking about, the questions are always asked, how am I going to get up and running? How am I going to learn? What are the types of programs you have for onboarding? What do you do for ongoing training, whether it's leadership or individual contributor level? So I think it's a big retention play, and it's really important for people's success.
Yeah, I second that. I've got a recent story at Planview. So, we're at $340 million recurring revenue, a little over 400 million with professional services company, right? And, look, we brought 3 companies together with new investors, and, with this great resignation going on, people decided to leave, or, and we're trying to backfill and hire really good reps. We had this guy that was just amazing, presented well, super well communicated, Harvard MBA, and he's young, right? Really young. And I asked him in the final interview when he accepted our offer, how many offers did you have? He said he had 5 offers. And I said, why'd you go with us? And he goes, you guys were about competitively, on the on target earnings, but you're the only one that had an enablement program. And I want to learn how to become a world-class seller. And I think I can learn that here. So that was like a really good story from my point of view, because it's like enablement was the key differentiator between the 5 competitors.
It's a great story. I actually just saw a stat yesterday from Forrester that enablement and sales support in general is becoming more and more important to sellers, right? Historically, it wasn't something that sellers really thought about. But especially with people who are coming up through the ranks today, that type of support is critical. So
yeah.
I also think, like, us living through a pandemic the last 2.5 years, and a lot of those experience for people were in office. So you could be in a pod and sitting with all your teammates and you can learn a ton. I mean, it was like being a sponge in those days, and we're all sitting in like, a group and learning from each other, listening to phone calls. You can ask the person next to you a quick question. Like, going fully remote kind of changed the landscape of how people learn and how they're enabled. And I think how important it is to have a really solid plan of how to deliver that enablement to people that are mostly remote at this point, and need to learn on an island. I think that definitely has changed the importance of it. And I do find, to like kind of piggyback on your point, that's a question that's being asked now in every interview. How are you going to onboard me? How am I supported? What does enablement look like? Whereas I think prior to COVID, it wasn't as much a top of mind thing for reps because they were sitting with their team, and were able to hear a lot in the office.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on to the next topic, because I think we're already getting there, right? Because I want to talk about what good enablement looks like. I'm sure a lot of folks on this call have implemented some form of enablement program, and I'm sure some have been successful and some have not been, right? We've all seen the good and the bad, but from your perspectives, especially, as VPs, very senior level people, what does good look like from an enablement perspective? And Dave, let's go to you this time.
Look, enablement is ongoing, right? So you have to have a ramping onboarding program, right? So a 30, 60, 90 day, right, learning. But it doesn't stop there. Then it's leveraging once they get off of ramp, and we measure time to first deal and time to second deal at Planview. But the coaching, the ongoing coaching, that's where the data. Earlier you heard me say good sales leadership also has a strong understanding of the systems that we use in the data. So like, who's got the highest batting average, that's closing more new logos than the other person? Who's got the biggest ACV average? Who's got the shortest time to close deals? And those are really the 3 levers that you can coach to really improve your team. So, good enablement really starts with having a program first off, and a platform like a Saleshood that allows you to have that knowledge live in perpetuity. But it's not just one and done. You have to continuously improve it, version it, and work with your leadership. So we actually make all of our leaders go through the enablement first, and then they're responsible for economies of scale to teach their sellers and go through the exercises with their sales team, almost like a franchise, right? So the thought is, you can scale repeatable processes like a franchise does if you put everyone through it. So, if we're a McDonald's corporation, you're not going to go and have, your new your fry cook go to corporate to get trained up, right? You're going to do it in the field, and it's going to be the manager that's responsible for that department or that store or that owner of that store that's totally accountable and knows how to operate their business. We run very much the same way, so we can get economies of scale. So leveraging data and understanding, benchmarking people against each other is another great example of how you can identify coaching moments and opportunities to improve your team. But I would say that the biggest thing is start with a platform and really make sure that the people that you hire, that they have a fast time to ramp. You shorten your time to productivity is one of the biggest levers you have as a sales leader to get people up and productive. We all know, and we've all seen the people that that joined us, they didn't, get a base hit early enough. They didn't have that opportunity swing for a home run. And they end up leaving after 6 months. And that cost you upwards to $1 million in lost productivity and salary and benefits. So you can't say enough about making sure that you have an enablement strategy in place to attract people, retain people, and get people fully ramped quickly.
Awesome. Carrie, how about you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I agree with everything Dave's saying. I think the thing that I would challenge other VPs of sales to do first is to take a look at your operating cadences. So I think before you can even really roll out solid enablement, you need to make sure that your team is operating in a way on a Monday to Friday in a way that's putting revenue generating activities first, and they're not distracted by 100 other things that are frankly not as important. So kind of taking away, like blocking and tackling for them a little bit and setting up the right operating cadence. And then I think I'm a big fan of the 30, 60, 90 day type of plan. And I think the way that works best is, the boot camp and the onboarding is one piece, but that ever evolving, like longer term training, it should really be delivered by the sales leadership team. So I have my leaders own a piece of it, and we all work together to figure out what it is that we want that session to look like. I empower them to create something that's kind of their own and deliver something that might have worked for them in their past or that they're really passionate about. And then we structure that enablement on the 60, 90 day side of it based on the leaders owning sessions and delivering those meetings. The other thing that I have put into place that I think helps, and I've done this alongside enablement, is a new hire Friday session that's just ongoing all year round, where we talk with our reps and we figure out like where are some things, some gaps, things that are missing, and anybody that's under 6 months, needs to join those, so we can keep advocating for that learning. And I think the learning has to be ever evolving. Like people, I want to fail fast. So I want to try a bunch of different things. And if they don't work or they don't stick, let's try something different or let's tweak it. And everything that I'm doing involves some sort of competition because we're all in sales. And so everybody's driven by competition and wants to win. And I do think you need to, give praise or recognition for people that are getting it done and doing it right from an enablement perspective as well. So I like to highlight in all hands things like, this person was first to complete X amount of, goals within the enablement structure, not just ACV, because I think, the ACV might take 6 weeks to get a deal. So what are you doing to build the confidence in that rep for those 6 weeks in regards to recognition and praise? And I think enablement's a really great area to be able to provide some of that feedback.
Yeah. I was going to ask, both of you guys, how involved should sales leadership and leadership in general be in an enablement program? I think it's funny. I talk to a lot of folks in enablement who are like, I'm working so hard. I don't have a ton of resources. I'm trying to get buy-in from the top, but like, I can't get it. I can't get the buy-in from my sales leader, from our CEO. Enablement doesn't feel like a priority. So, I mean, how does somebody get that buy-in from leadership? And then how involved should sales leaders be in delivering the enablement process?
I mean, I'm really passionate about this because I have seen it go pretty awry when sales leaders haven't been involved. I don't really understand how sales leaders couldn't own this, because the goal is to create outcomes that we're all working towards. And enablement's not in the field, frankly. So you really need to crowdsource and the people that are on the ground and the people that are talking to the customers and figure out what's landing, what's not landing, how can we shift our messaging, all those types of things. So I think as a sales executive, it should be part of your job. I look at enablement. I've had them report into me. I've had them, dotted line into me, but I've always considered them, an arm to my business. And my cadence with our VP of enablement is to meet with them every single week. And I'm making sure that we're staying on track and we have, a project plan for things that we're doing, that we're working on together. And for my leaders, when I'm hiring and when I'm putting in job descriptions, enablement is a big part of their job description. Like I love Dave's plan where he has the leaders go out and roll it out and they have to deliver the enablement to the reps, because that's how you scale large organizations. I also think owning sessions is really important. And then they need to own follow-up and saleshood. So when we say, let's all record a video, we're going to go watch it and give feedback. If the leaders aren't giving the feedback, the reps are going to think it's a waste of time. And the minute the reps think they're doing anything that's to check a box, you've lost your culture. So to me, I think it's a really important and critical piece of making sure that you not only get to your sales goals, but you retain your employees, you make it a fun culture, and you help those enablement folks really drive towards the outcomes that you're leading towards.
Awesome. Dave, anything to add on that?
One word comes to mind: implicated pain. So you're a seller, you're trained to do discovery, you're trained to build a business case and sell the outcomes. You have to treat your company like you need to sell the leadership, the board on this investment. and it's a big investment. So you look at things like, what's our attrition for our sales reps? What's our average time to close? What's our average batting average for new logos? What's our retention rate for our customers? These are the metrics that we already invested tons of money, right? In CRM and data analytics tools to give us this data. And that investment makes a lot of sense from a leadership standpoint. The missing ingredient is leveraging that data to figure out benchmarking people against themselves, against other teams, and be able to figure out how you can improve performance. You want revenue to increase? It's not adding more headcount and keep doing the same thing. That's crazy. It's to get your people really productive. And we all know that the most productive reps are building pipeline, that are closing deals. They're too busy to take interviews and get poached away, right? So your A players are going to stay with you. Your B players are going to get coached up to A players. And, your C players, maybe they become B players, or you figure out that, you just need to cut bait, because even through the coaching, they're not getting it. They don't have that figure it out factor. So if you want to truly get support from your leadership, treat your company like a sales cycle. Go in and do your discovery, create your observations, build your business case, and then give them a budget of what it's going to cost. Eli would be happy to tell you what it costs to do an enablement program for small, medium, large, because I've had that discussion with them. I've built 3 enablement programs at 3 different companies that had no investment in enablement. And before I took the job, I got aligned with the board and the senior leadership that I'm only accepting this role if I can run revenue operations and I can run enablement, because it's so important to the strategy for scale and getting predictable revenue.
Yeah, and I would also just chime in there. I think that when you're looking at your enablement programs and you're building those things out, you should have measurable outcomes. Like, you should be able to say, like, we want to get to X based on, it can be any KPI that you're measuring from a sales perspective, and really see what the impact of that enablement program is. There are ways to put that into place. We did that at Yext with Eli's guidance, actually, and it worked really well. We were able to see, like, okay, from the point we put this program into place and we did it every quarter, did a refresh, like, we're moving deal cycles up. We're able to land bigger new logos because we're selling more products, because we've done more enablement on the different types of products and the messaging. So I think there's a lot of ways that you should consistently be tying in KPIs to the enablement program.
Totally.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
And that is leading us into our next topic about enablement ROI and impact. But before we get there, I do have a question from Jessica, and it's okay if you guys don't have an answer, but she's wondering if either of you have experience with enablement in the channel, right? So enabling your channel partners, and if so, how do these points translate? Are there differences, or what does good look like for that environment?
Yeah, I'll answer. I see our partners as an extension of our sales team, right? So at a minimum, we're helping them with our messaging, positioning, narrative. So they're getting access to a lot of our content, and Saleshood does have a partner module that they can participate. And that is something that I believe at Planview, we're actually exploring, as for the first time ever, we're really starting to build a channel program. So it's kind of a ground up. And what I mean by channel, I mean by, we have reference partners, but really these are people that are reselling on our behalf. And that's a new one for Planview. So we've been historically selling mostly direct and very little channel. And it's one of our top initiatives this year. So if you think about the money we're going to spend on recruiting partners and getting the partners enabled up on implementing the products and reselling, it becomes a natural extension to also share with them the enablement best practices that we have.
Fantastic. Carrie, anything to share on that one?
I would have said the same exact thing, that the partner network is the extension of our sales team. So the way in which you're running sales programs, you should run for your partners. I think having, an option with Saleshood is fantastic. Having a partner portal is awesome. I spent a lot of time at Yext, actually, and at Salesforce, educating the partners, spending time at their kickoffs, like helping to walk them through what it is that we do, what are our value props, all those types of things. So I think you should just treat the partner network as if it's an extension of your sales team.
Yeah, same principles apply, right? They have to represent your brand. They have to know their pitch. They have to be on message. So yeah, I mean, make the same tools available. Makes perfect sense. Awesome. Thank you. So let's dig a little bit deeper into impact, because I love what I've been hearing from you guys so far. I think, again, many people tend to measure enablement just based on learning activities. Did they complete the course? Did they pass the quiz? Did they get their badge? Whatever. In my experience, if you treat enablement that way, you're usually going to fall short of expectations and goal. So talk a little bit more, both of you, about how you approach enablement ROI, and how do you actually connect enablement activity directly to business outcomes, because that's often the gap that a lot of people can't see past. Carrie, I'm gonna jump back to you on that one to kick things off.
Well, first of all, no one wants to do anything to check a box and have busy work. So I think anytime you're like, earn this badge, do this video for that, like it's got to be like feedback loops back and forth, constantly giving feedback so that the reps feel, or the managers feel, like they're learning something and that it's a valuable use of their time. If anybody doesn't feel it's a valuable use of their time, I think there's definitely a miss in regards to what are the outcomes and what it is that you want to do with the sales org. So that's my first comment on that. I think in order to tie enablement into outcomes, again, it's really about figuring out, what do you want those outcomes to be? At Yext, for me, a couple of those things were the value messaging. Like, what are the 3 differentiators of Yext, and how are we going to market? Why do our customers buy from us? And then positioning a really solid discovery based on, knowing where we wanted to go. So we spent a lot of time on one piece being discovery when I first started there. And the way that we were able to tie that in is like, how many more deals have we put into the pipeline since we started this program and armed the reps with the right questions to ask? And how are those deals progressing through the pipeline? So it's one thing to discover a deal. It's another thing to be able to ask the right questions to get the deal to move through the cycle. So you just sort of have to have a starting place. Like, where were you prior to having the program in place, and where do you want to go? And then start measuring. Some of it is going to be like more, just through word of mouth, through the rep, like, this helped me here, and grabbing some of those sound bites. But there are things that you can actually measure from a pipeline perspective in regards to increases and gains that you can tie back to the types of training that you're putting into place. I could go on and on about this, because it really just depends on what's truly important. What I'm working on right now at Checkr is figuring out how to get that time to ramp shorter. So when Dave talks about, like, it takes 6 weeks to get probably your first or second deal, like, I'm not at 6 weeks right now. So I want to try to get that to be a shorter timeline. And I'm measuring, what were we at when I first started versus where are we going to be starting, in Q2 when we put these programs into place. So I think that's the first thing, is finding the benchmark and then figuring out, like, where you want to go from there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, the sales productivity is the best common denominator that I can think of for measuring ROI. So how it's calculated is quite simply, you take the ACV that you booked for the quarter and you divide it by the number of reps, and that gives you your average ACV. And you can slice and dice it that you've got ramping reps, or you've got, but really look at it where your reps that are not on ramp, and how do you move that number up? Right? How do you increase productivity? And there's only 3 levers, right? There's the increasing the deal size, which Carrie talked about. There is the shortening time to close a deal. And then there is increasing more winning percentage, right? Increasing your batting average, moving from, new logo at closing at 20% to 35%, for example. When you have that data and you can look at your business through that lens, you can really start to make an impact on coaching. So now we train our VPs, our frontline leaders, to really focus on this data framework and looking at, we run this REX framework that is results. So everybody looks at results, right? It's quarterly rear view mirror, monthly rear view mirror on productivity. It's effort, which is really just monitoring how many deals are in play and how many outbounds are they making. So we measure that. And then the last 2 are the most important from enablement. It's knowledge and skills. So REX stands for results, effort, knowledge, and skills. Knowledge is, do they have the knowledge to do the job? Are they applying that knowledge? Are you able to inspect? And then skills are, who's the best at getting a meeting, converting that meeting to an opportunity? Who's the best at getting through sales stages, with more efficiency? So when you start to benchmark your people against each other, you start to get a line, right? Above the line 50%, below the line 50%. It's those people that are below the line 50% that you really want to focus your coaching opportunities on and improve that ROI. So it all comes back to sales productivity. And it's the simplest, easiest way to measure your team's productivity and the performance on a quarterly or a monthly basis.
Yeah. What I love about what you're saying is that you're mentioning both leading and lagging indicators, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You're looking at learning activity and certification and knowledge, meeting set, right? Top funnel activity, but then you are looking at what is the ultimate outcome. And that takes, if you're in a complex B2B sale, that can take months to see.
Oh,
You don't want to just rely on that, but you need to eventually be able to see that and
yeah.
correlate it to how engaged were they in the enablement process, and what was their performance.
You have to inspect that data, right? You have to have really good metrics that you can inspect with working with your sales or revenue operations teams to help get that data and rep productivity. That's where you can make a difference, right? Before you go and hire a bunch more people, see what you can do to move the needle in increasing your rep productivity. That's really going to make a big difference for you.
And productivity per head, I mean, that is the most critical piece to measure. And the gains don't have to be like 100K per head. Like you could get a 5K per head increase, and that's substantial if you look at it on a monthly basis for a business that has 100 reps.
Yeah,
So I think like thinking about, that's why I like to challenge enablement leaders to work with me on outcomes first. Because like, what's the outcome we're trying to get to? If we can get everybody to gain 5K, productivity in a month on their numbers across the board in a quarter, that's like significant. And to Dave's point, you might not need to hire more people. Maybe you just need to figure out how to, keep increasing that productivity per head. And then the other thing is once you do hire more people, now you can show them what great looks like versus bringing them in and everybody's still trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. You have a historical record, right, of what's worked. And if you have a platform like a Saleshand, where you can keep track of that, and where you can have people record themselves and top performers record themselves and replicate that performance over time and scale it out, it's incredibly efficient and powerful.
Yeah, and just share some of those good, like I like to create playlists, the best of playlists, the best pitch, the best outbound email, the best questions, the best whatever, and like highlight those in all hands. If you do that a couple of times, everybody knows that you're paying attention to Saleshand and it's a tool that actually matters. If you never reference it or you never leverage it from a leadership perspective, the reps are going to feel like it's busy work.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, I mean, not to turn this into a Saleshand pitch, because it's not, but Dave, you were talking about, you've got to have transparency into the data, right? You need to have data available to you. Something that I've seen at Saleshand that I haven't seen a lot of other places, that we actually have a correlation engine built into the product where you can pull reports, and the x-axis is how engaged was this person in learning activities, and the y is how much revenue did they generate this year, right? Yeah. And it's all just put there on a chart, and you can see who's the top performer, who's the low performer. These are the people that I need to focus on improving, and these are the people whose behavior I can try to replicate, right? And it's right there in front of you in black and white, and I think it's really powerful.
John, I saw that for the first time where our VP of enablement showed it at our last QBR, and we showed our performance of our people stack ranked, and the bottom performers were the ones that did not have as much time in Saleshand and didn't apply themselves in learning the tool, learning the exercises.
I think like I'm not purchasing tools anymore that don't have analytics. Like it doesn't make sense. Like we're going fast, and in our seat, and Dave and I see there's a lot going on, and all of the solutions that help us with rep productivity, they have to have analytics, or else what am I actioning on? So I think it's fantastic that you guys have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question from Mackenzie here, who has some varied experience in her company. She's been a seller and a sales leader, a sales manager at the company, and that is now an enablement leader function. And again, not sure if you guys have specific insight into this, but for somebody with a varied background like that, who sort of come up in different roles within sales, any advice for how to translate that experience into a leadership, an enablement leadership role? And either one of you.
I have a really relevant story. Again, Carrie talked about having the luxury of having really good sales enablement as an IC. I did not, but when I was a RVP at Zora, we had a new president come in who Carrie actually used to work for as well. He came to me and said, I want you to build an enablement program. I'm like, I don't know anything about that. That's all right. We're going to hire a consulting firm. They're going to help you, right? Some world-class organization to really help us build a scalable enablement program. My first thought was, that sounds like an awful job, right? I'm going to teach everybody on how to sell, and I'm probably going to make less money. I'm going to have very little upside. But you know what? He was a great mentor, and he asked me, what do you want to do one day? I said, well, I want to be a president or CRO, right? I want to run go-to-market for a company. And he goes, you have to learn people strategy and enablement, or you won't be successful. And then the second thing you have to learn, you really truly have to understand the data and the operational stuff that comes out of a quote to cash, right? In a subscription business model, which I had a pretty good handle on, but The enablement, I truly did not know. And so I went from being an IC to a VP to moving into this operational go-to-market, sales productivity. And that's where I met Eli, read the book, right? And learned a tremendous amount. And it's probably the most pivotal thing that I've done in my career. It's differentiated me against, retained searches against 20 other candidates for a CRO role, because I was able to show them command and a strategy around people first and enablement. So, to me, I'm very passionate. I think it's been the key thing to my success is really, truly understanding enablement. And so enablement is at least 1/3, or if not 50% of a sales leader's strategy. And so you really have to get good at it and understand how it works.
Love it. Carrie, anything to add?
I mean, I think you get immediate street cred because you've done the job. So, I think there's definitely an edge for anybody who was in sales and has gone through those, experiences, has been customer facing, has had to deal with, customer facing roles are stressful. They're not always easy. And there's a lot of objections you have to handle. So I do think if you've had that experience as an IC or sales manager, it does set you apart in regards to being able to really relate with the team. But again, irregardless of whether you're a sales manager or you're not a sales manager and you have a full enablement background or an ops background, you have to have alignment with the sales leadership team. So I think yes, you can get some street cred. Yes, you can probably share a lot more stories that are relative based on your experiences, but you still need to be aligned with the leadership team in regards to how you go to market with your enablement internally.
I have a bias. I actually think, your head of enablement, to Carrie's point, the street cred goes a long way, right? So I think the enablement program at Zuora, when we launched it, was successful because I had the street cred. I was employee 52. I was a top IC, got promoted to VP. I was a top VP. So that street cred really helped a lot. In fact, our current enablement leader, she was a teacher by profession, got into sales, software sales, moved into management, and then got into enablement. So she brings all kinds of street cred, both from a leadership and a seller.
Yeah, I think you're right. It can certainly work if you don't have that background. I've seen it before, but it definitely adds that layer of credibility. And if you are an enablement and you don't have the sales background, I think it's just all the more important to get buy-in from leadership, right, and start building trust with your team and building connectivity with the team.
Usually, the people that are the street cred and the storytelling works well if you have the sales background. But then if you don't have the sales background and you're operations or enablement, you're actually much better at the content delivery. So I think there's pros that come with each, and then you just have to be willing to learn a lot and move fast and align with your sales leadership team.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Excellent, guys. We're going to keep going, and everybody's appreciating the commentary here, so this is great. Last little section here as we wrap up. I want to know if you have specific advice for sales leaders who just don't believe in enablement as we've been discussing it. They just can't wrap their heads around it. They don't think it's worth the investment. They haven't seen the payoff. What do you say to them in order to change their minds if their mind isn't already changed after seeing this session? But Dave, let's go to you.
I mean, I would just ask them, identify who are their top sellers in their company, right? And then ask them, do they want 20 more of the same, right? What if you could get all of your other sellers to be top sellers, right? And that's really what enablement gives you the platform to be able to do, is improve people's performance. Look, you don't go to college or university to learn sales, right? And we learn it on the street. And there's tons of consultancies and different programs that we all spend a lot of money at our kickoff, and we put them on stage and we do a little bit of enablement, and then we go away back to our day job, and everybody still runs around and does their own thing on how they sell. Best practices need to be captured. That tribal knowledge is important, and be able to capture that, whether it's customer stories of success, a great pitch on a narrative, handle, competitive traps setting or objection handling. That tribal knowledge from your top sellers is key. And you need to really capture that and get that into all the other people that are joining, so they can make the big money too, and you'll scale your organization.
Awesome. Carrie, how about you?
I mean, I'd want to know what companies these are, because apparently they're getting a ton of inbound leads and don't need the help. I think overall, if there's sales leaders out there who don't believe in enablement, then I don't think they're doing enough. Like that probably means, to Dave's point, that they have a couple top reps that are doing really well, and maybe they're hitting the plan that's in front of them. But imagine if you enabled 20 more reps to also be productive and what you could do for the bottom line for your company. So I think if there's a lack of belief because you're doing really well, just think about, I'm always trying to, I'm never satisfied. So I'm like, well, how can I do more? How can I do more? How can I keep growing? So that would be maybe the mindset there. If you're in a business where you're just not aligned to enablement, you need to think about, like, just go back to basics. Like it's a team sport. So whether you're a coach or you're a teacher or whatever your background is prior to getting into sales, like all of those things had process, they had alignment. Any great team is going through practice every day, and they're going through doing the little things, going through the best practices, learning, failing fast, trying something new, and then sharing with people around what worked, what didn't work. Like that's how you really create, number one, an awesome culture of great retention, and also are able to like kind of take your organization to the next level. So I would really challenge anybody out there that doesn't believe to try something new. Like go partner with your enablement leader and figure out, like, start with what the outcomes are and figure out like how can you get there. And you need to start, to Dave's point, and go do some discovery within your own organization. I just started at Checkr. I'm 65 days in, I think, and I've spent 60 days just learning. I haven't done anything. I haven't really spoken to one customer. All I've done is talk to all the people internally on what's working, what's not working, where are you struggling, how are the customers receiving us, so that I can try to make effective change. You can't really do that unless you go and listen to the people.
100%.
Yeah, totally true. Look, I think first off, I wouldn't hire anyone in my organization as a frontline leader if they didn't pass the interview and how they do enablement, right? So like a lot of the behavioral based interview questions we'll ask our sales leadership is, what's the level of importance for enablement? How do you do enablement? What do you think your core responsibility is in enablement? And those questions, right, are really important to ask, because you'll get some that say, hey, enablement, they're supposed to train up my guys and get them battle ready, and don't send them to me till battle ready. They won't make it through the first interview, right? It's the ones that understand it's white collar coaching, and that I'm here to help develop people's careers and help make them more money, and the revenue will flow if you really invest the time and energy in coaching and developing your team, and you make that kind of part of your operating cadence, what Carrie was talking about, that is so important on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. The revenue is going to take care of itself. I promise you it will. But yeah, they won't even make it past the first round of interviewing if they actually don't think about enablement first.
It's like being an athlete and saying all you have to do is go play the game.
Right, exactly.
Instead of practice. It makes no sense. Like you're going to be better if you practice every day versus just going out there and taking the shot.
Absolutely right. And the only other thing that I'll add is, listen, as a marketing leader, I have seen the cross-functional impact of enablement, right? It's not just about empowering your reps. It's about connecting teams, right? And it's about connecting marketing and sales and CS and sales and product, and getting everybody on the same page. I've seen product rollouts, for instance, without enablement in place that are a total mess, right? Everybody's on their own schedule. People don't have the same information. Marketing is finding things out after sales. It's a mess. Yeah. But when you have good enablement, when you have people who are pulling on the people from across your organization to get the information that they need, and then distribute that information in a logical way, it helps the entire organization, and marketing becomes more organized and can create better content for sales, right? And product can be more aligned with what sales is hearing in the market, and translate that into product building, right? And that translates into how we handle customers as well. It pulls everything together. It's actually like a really centralized org. And I've seen the power of that firsthand. So I think
and then you mentioned customers, like at the end of the day, we're all in this to service the customer. So if you're a customer-centric organization and you're disorganized and you're not on the same page with how you're going to market and the messaging that you're giving to customers out in the market, that's going to be felt in the market, and it's going to affect your brand. So I think there's another piece of this that's the external brand, because all the sales reps are the people that are going out and talking to the customer, which is, second to the employee, the most important asset to a business. So I think that's a good point to bring up customer centricity there too.
Yeah, and on that note, right, like Carrie and I are responsible for all the revenue, not just new bookings, right? So we're actually rolling sales hit out to our customer success team and our professional services team and our solution consultants. Why? Because in a subscription business model, as soon as you take $1, you're on the hook to deliver value on an ongoing basis. The killer in a subscription business model is attrition of revenue, right? Churn. You can't afford it. And so you need to make the investments even beyond, the sellers and bringing new logos in and expansion. It's like, the best practices, the tribal knowledge can also be captured for the other departments that are key to a revenue leader's success in making sure that if you're growing at 50% year over year and you're leaking 30%, yeah, you're not going to be doing too well in your role for very long, right? You're going to have a problem that you need to solve. And so those problems can be solved, obviously, with, having a customer success program and making sure those people have the same tribal knowledge that they need to do their jobs as well.
Perfect. All right. Let's see. We have actually one more question that just rolled in last minute. You guys have any recommended resources or books around enablement that have been powerful for you? Dave, anything pop to mind?
I mean, there's a couple. I mean, the first book I ever read on enablement is Eli's book called Saleshand. And I think the book was out before the platform. So I would start there. And then I think there's a couple of, I can't remember the latest title that Eli's published, but that's a good book, guys. You really fundamentally want to understand it. It's a great book. There's another good book called The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. I'm actually having my team read this entire book. All my leaders are reading this, and we're actually going through chapter after chapter. And it talks a lot about enablement in this book, not in the traditional context of but like how important it is to get everyone on the same page and getting everyone selling with the right disciplines in place.
Awesome. And Eli's second book is called Enablement Mastery. And I'll share that link out with folks, in our follow-up email as well, if you want to check it out.
Great.
Carrie, any additional resources you want to share?
I mean, I could pull a Dave and pull the book out from behind my laptop and show it to you, but I won't imitate him. So I've read both of Eli's books. I think they're fantastic. And Eli is a master of this stuff. So I highly recommend anything people can steal from his mind is amazing. I've done it for years and it's worked really well for me. I also, similar to Dave, have other books that I have my leadership team read that have like transferable skills in them. So there's a book called Making of a Manager by Julie Zhao. It's fantastic. And it's a story of someone who was in their first year of leadership and all the things they learned and then how they up-leveled themselves for year two. And there's a lot in there about coaching and how important it is to provide feedback in real time and also feedback in different ways, like writing, video, because people learn in all different ways. So using all the senses for that. So I think it's really interesting to read leadership books where you can pull some of those transferable themes into the way that you coach your teams.
Incredible. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it. We've had some great questions, good conversation, and thank you both so much for your insight today. I think this was a really, really productive session, and we really appreciate your taking the time. Also appreciate everybody who joined us today. We know you're all busy, but thanks for sitting with us for close to an hour to listen to Carrie and Dave. Again, we'll be following up with the webinar recording in the next 24, 36 hours, hopefully very soon. So you'll have that, so you can watch it on demand. And I'll be following up with that the link to Eli's book as well. That's a great call. So thank you so much. Stay tuned for our next webinar next month. An invite will be going out for that very soon. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions for us, feel free to reach out to us at saleshood.com. And you can also schedule a demo there if you're interested in learning more about how our platform specifically works. So thanks again to everybody. Carrie, Dave, thanks again.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.